I recorded, I'm trying to figure out where it is on the screen, this video earlier today as an experiment in recording my writing process. And while I thought it went very well, I had kind of a few technical issues that I didn't realize until after the recording was done. And so I was debating whether or not just to scrap the whole thing and give up, or to try and salvage it. And I've decided to try and salvage it so I can continue with the process. And then hopefully this will work, and then I can do this with future short stories as well. But I'm going to play through the parts of the video that are working. And then where I shifted cameras to the internet to show parts of that, I lost audio, and so I will just do quick interjections and summarize what was covered during those times. And hopefully the parts that did get recorded will work enough that you'll be able to get the idea of how this writing process. So here it goes. Here's the start of the video as it was recorded earlier. Hello and welcome on this fine Saturday afternoon. I'm going to be doing a little experiment here, and I'm hoping you'll all sit through it with me. I've got my kids playing games and running amok, so there probably will be a lot of ambient noise. This is a home with a large family, so that's kind of how the recordings go. Unfortunately, I don't have a pristine recording environment to do any of this stuff, but hopefully you'll still have fun with this. So when I was early in my writing, and even more recently, I was looking at ways that people share how they write, like what their writing process is. And I could always find videos on the basics of writing, how to write, how to approach narrative and story and stuff like that. But I never got to see the process in the same way that I could see it with artists. So with artists, I could sit down and watch them draw. And in some cases, I was very fortunate to have them talk me through the process. And they would stop, pull out, a sheet of paper and draw on that. And as I would see that process, it taught me a lot about what was going on, not just what they were putting down, but why they were putting it down, what their thoughts were, how things came together. But I couldn't find an equivalent with writing. With writing, or even recently, I was looking up I can find videos of people that are writing, but it's always in their head. What they'll do is they'll talk about, here's the book I'm working on, here's kind of what I'm doing with the characters. Okay, and I'm going to set a timer for 20 or 30 minutes and do a writing sprint, and I'm going to leave a timer going, and you can write your own books or watch me. And so they'll sit down and you just watch them writing, but you don't really see the process or why they're doing what they're doing. And so I thought that if I started writing something, did a short story, I can talk you through my process. And I thought that might be of interest to somebody. So we'll see how this goes. Once again, there's going to be a lot of mistakes, possible noises, interruptions. I may have to pause the recording if there's enough screaming or something else that I have to go deal with. But here we go. So when I start writing, the first thing I do is I need to have some kind of concept of where I'm going. It doesn't always have to be perfect. Sometimes I will start writing and just kind of see what comes out, just kind of free form writing. And I'll just make stuff up as I go, which I can then use as a springboard for something else. In the case of the short story I'm planning on working on today, and this may be done in one shot or this may take multiple times. Like I said, this is kind of a new experiment, so we'll see what happens. But I had a thought of what I wanted to write. And the main reason for it was because of just things that started clicking and a lot of what if questions. A lot of my writing comes from that. Either something I'm trying to work out myself, so writing can become cathartic for me to work through my own thought processes on paper, or things that are just interesting or that pop up or just grab me in a specific way. And when I had given myself this assignment to start writing and to do this short story, yet again, recording it here for you. And by the way, you're going to hear a lot of my bad habits come out when I do these because it is so freeform. So yet again, or as I was saying, I recognize that I do have a lot of those, and I've been trying to get better at those over the years, and my students and others still call me out on them. I'm working on it, but hopefully you'll put up with those as well. Anyway, I had been trying to figure out what I could write about. And I go mushroom hunting, and I enjoy that, as well as other foraging and gardening and things like that. But one of the things that keeps coming up and that people always send me videos about are things to do with zombie funguses. So I'm going to do these were the things that kind of were sticking out to me, was this idea of the zombie mushrooms, and what zombies could look like. Let me just skip a little bit over to here. And then also to the point where I've been having a lot of people send me these short videos, especially like on Facebook and stuff like that, where you've got the zombie cicadas, where it's not like the ants where they're still mostly full living ants and they look like they're just functioning normally, but then, you know, the zombie fungus is controlling them, you know, just controlling their brain or whatever. But these creatures that are fully eaten out, sometimes their heads have been eaten out, and yet the motor functions are still happening and being controlled by the fungus, which was crazy to me. And so that led to, at one point I learned about Mike the headless chicken, and I talked in the video about the story of Mike and how the farmer was going out, was going to kill a chicken for a meal, and when he chopped the chicken's head off, it was still left with the brainstem, as well as, or with the brainstem intact, and a lucky by chance blood clot also stopped it from bleeding out, and this chicken lived for an additional 8 or 18 months. And so I did a lot of research into how that worked, how that happened, and that led to me researching and studying parasympathetic nervous systems, these places where function and, you know, even just other types of brain function and motor function is stored in these other systems within our body, not necessarily all within our brain. And so it was just all of these different ideas and concepts that have been kind of floating around, just because whenever I hear something interesting or see something interesting, I want to learn about it more. And occasionally things start to make connections, either narratively or in other ways in my brain. It's like, oh, I'm going to store that information away. That's kind of cool. And so I took all those things, and that kind of became the foundation of what I want to do with the story. Which then after that, I jumped back over to this portion, which I will show you right now. Over to here. I don't want to write a story that is just about zombies, because the science behind it, the ideas, the way the systems work, that stuff's all very, very interesting to me, but I don't care about that in story form. For me, if I'm going to write a story, I need it to be something I can care about. So all this other information just becomes fuel for ideas, and it kind of becomes kind of the coal that will help, you know, fuel the fires as I try and get this story going. So I can write down a couple notes. Usually when I'm writing, I have the habit of writing up above, but then making little notes for myself at the end of my document, so I can do zombie fungus, cordyceps, if I can spell, cordyceps, let's see, zombie cicadas. From there, I've got Mike the headless chicken. So these are just all ideas or concepts or things that are going to help fuel some of the narrative. Parasympathetic nervous systems. And so that's the start of some information. So I know that I want this to matter to me in some way. So yet again, not just the zombie stuff. Like, that's cool. I could do more research. I could try and come up with this great science fiction explanation for all that. That's not the kind of writer I am. Sometimes I'll put stuff like that in my narrative or some of my stories, but really I want to know what the emotions are. What is somebody going through? What's a challenge? And so for me, I have to think about what's going on in the world around me, what's going on in my life and my children's lives. Uh, Politics have always been bad. As much as I think we go, well, it's worse than it's ever been. I can look back at history and read journals and reports from ages gone. And guess what? Politics are the same. There's still divisiveness. I had a great lunch with one of my buddies actually yesterday, and he's from India, and we talked about partition. So this is partially brought on because I've been still going through the Marvel shows, and me and my wife watched Miss Marvel, and we saw about partition there. I had heard stories about that before, as well as I'm trying to think of where it was. A lot of the cooking shows that I was watching about India and the way food changed and transitioned in India spoke about partition and how that influenced the culinary development in India, what things changed, what went out, what came in. But we were talking about partition, and even with that, he was talking through what led up to it, how it happened, and how really before partition happened, people were living together. It was difficult. They were under British rule, but they were approaching this place where they were going to gain independence. And everybody who was kind of there and going for that was all together, like, it's going to be wonderful, we're going to be happy, we're going to live together. And then the concept came in of, if this happens, our group's going to be a minority, or this other group might take domination over us, or those thoughts came in, and it actually led to this fear of what's going to happen to us when we transition. And it became kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, at least as the way it was explained to me. So if I don't have the history exactly right, I apologize. But the story and the concept resonated, so I'm sharing it the way I heard it. But the idea was that from that, then it was, oh, we'll get freedom, but here's what we need to do to protect ourselves. Where before it was like, we lived together fine. We loved our neighbors. We worked together. But then it was, we need our space. You need your space. And it became kind of hostile. And this idea developed of the us versus them, that concept of other, the dehumanization process began. And I've given talks before with games of zombies and dehumanization. And so, yet again, these same thoughts resonate, but that's what led to it. That's where people started shunning their neighbors and seeing each other as different. It wasn't that they were before. It may have existed in some form or shape, but it became greater once people had the perceived fear of what other people were going to do to them, and then they reacted according to that belief that that's what would happen. And so it kind of drove itself into happening when it wasn't going to in the first place, or when it might not have. And the same thing happens all the time. As humans, we always are doing self-fulfilling prophecies. If we go to meet with someone and we think that they're going to think poorly of us, we will react accordingly. And so we may be hostile first, or we may take things they say as attacks when none is intended, but it's based on our perception of what we think that they're going to think. That you get the idea. It becomes this looping cycle that becomes problematic. So that's something that is human. That is something that happens all the time, where we can dehumanize others, where we can create these mental loops of expectation that actually cause the thing we're scared of to happen because of our actions. Anyway, I'm getting lost in a train of thought, but yet again, this is how my thinking goes with narrative development and story development, is just getting lost in these trains of thoughts and going, okay, well, what does that mean for me? How does this idea of other play into my world right now? Right now, I've got friends and family that are very, very political. And some of them are very entrenched in their ideas and beliefs about the other side and our side, whatever our side and the other side happens to be. And it's weird because when we have conversations and we talk about what that actually is, and they're like, oh, well, this other group, those people do these things. And I'm not going to say any of them because I don't really want to get one side or the other, because it's a mental construct. It is all of us. But with the conversation, it's they're going to do these things or they believe this. And I say, well, but you're friends with somebody who believes these things. You have a neighbor that believes this, who's very kind, who brings you food, that takes care of you. So the things that you're saying don't really align with the stuff that you're saying that they believe or that's happening. And the answer always is, well, my neighborhood's different, or my friends are the exception. And really, all of them, the truth is, your friends and your family and your neighbors, they are not the exception. But the perception that that greater other is there drives the fear, drives the narratives, drives the hatred and the anger and the separation, and causes conflict and hurt, even among people that you know have your best interests at heart, that do care about you, that are there to be supportive, but happen to have a different set of political beliefs, religious beliefs, or other types of beliefs. So that's something that happens, that does hit home. I can't change grandiose political anything. And I don't really want to write a story that gets that grandiose. So for me, if I'm looking at this as a short story, or even as a larger story, my thoughts are, what is the message that matters to me? How does this relate to me? So as I'm looking at this now and even thinking through the process, my next step would be to figure out, why should I care? And whenever I write, that's the big question. Whenever I create games, why does it matter? And sometimes the answer is, it doesn't for other people, and it just matters to me. And that's fine too. That's perfectly valid. But if I'm creating something for an audience, I'm trying to think of, why would they care? What matters to them? What message can be there that can help out? Sometimes I will write with a specific message in mind. Sometimes I'll write because it's part of the journey, because I'm interested in a character. In this case, because it is a shorter story and I do need to reach a conclusion or a point at some point, my thought is helping somebody, a child who's being indoctrinated into the us versus them or the other, to the idea of there isn't an us versus them. People are people. And if there's somebody else reacting poorly or doing something, maybe it's just that they are scared. Maybe it's that they see those around them as the other. And so you can be a friend to them. You can help show them that the other is okay. And so teaching love, teaching tolerance. So something along those lines. So I can make a quick note. Child learns to be accepting, to not prejudge, and to learn that there isn't an other. But that people, and that people are fallible, but are still people. Okay, hopefully I'll find a better way of explaining that and saying that. So this is my overall concept. I still don't know exactly how it's going to go. So and by the way, I apologize for my naughty words. So things like that. This is a long format speech and process, so you'll probably get a lot of that, and I apologize again. But that's something I'll keep working on too. I need to know who this child is. I want to know a little bit about him. And usually for me as a writer, when I'm doing that, this is a good time for me to go for a walk, to do busy work or whatever, where I just let my brain ruminate on who this character is. I start writing stories. One of the things that helps me the most when I'm creating characters is I need to understand that character and give them a voice. And usually the best characters for me come from people I know. So I'm not just taking a person I know and putting them in the book. Like, Gordon actually just ran down the stairs. So one of my sons, I'm not going to go, hey, Gordon. Gordon does. It's not that literal. It's not that one-to-one. But I can take traits of that personality. So my son Gordon, one of my lovely, lovely children, he's got some very positive things about him. He's very diligent. He's very hardworking. He likes to be on task. He likes to have a schedule. He can be very cheerful. He gets enthusiastic about stuff. There's a lot of really good stuff. But there are also some things about him that I know he struggles with. He's one of my children that gets tired. I have a few, and it's weird to see because certain of my children have personality traits that kind of tie together, and others of my children have other personality traits. And then we have Elena, who is her own magical creature. But for him, he's one of my children that when it's bedtime, he's out. He's tired. He just wants to sleep. He doesn't want to get up. Like, sleep is a thing. He needs it. He wants it. I have other children. For the love. If the world was ending and on fire and everything would be destroyed if they did not sleep, the world would be destroyed. Like, they fight it so hard because they don't want to miss anything. They want to see it. They're excited. Their brains are going. They're active. And so that different personality type shows in him. So I've already got a kid who I can now picture based on these traits. So this is a very diligent kid. He's well-meaning. He wants to follow the rules. If the family's doing cleanup, he's going to jump in. He's not one of the kids that's going to try and avoid it or play around. He's going to try and get in. He'll get his work done first, and that way he'll have that much more time to play. Oh, bumped my mic. And so that's the kind of kid I'm thinking of. This is a kid who is going to be a little bit tired when they've burned themselves out. They're going to kind of get lost in deep thought and almost appear depressed. So not necessarily depressed, but will have those kinds of traits and characteristics in their personality where they're very introverted and deep thought, holding things in, quiet, more of a resting, frowny, thoughtful face than the, excited squirrel child personality. So that's kind of my characters. I'm thinking through them and trying to figure out who they are. And the thing is, I want this to actually have a full zombie sequence. I want, them to have somebody getting munched on. And so I'm trying to think of how to do that without it being an actual zombie sequence, because this is a short story and I don't want it to be gory of, one child eating another child. And so this brings me back to the original content. The idea of, let me switch this over. I can't recreate everything that I said and all the thought processes that I went through, but I'll try and summarize it and then bring you back into it. So the beginning idea was I did want to have it be zombies, but I wanted to do it in a way that had a little bit of the shock value, got an idea started of, that followed along that idea of creating that other or the child seeing it through that context. And then having a reveal to make it more positive. So the main character sees the bugs turning into zombies, but he understands the neighborhood enough. Like, he's a very aware and attentive child, so he knows the world around him. Like, he gets kicked outside, like, go outside and play until it gets dark or whatever else. And so because he knows his neighborhood, because he knows the things around him, he's aware of it, he's been paying attention to these bugs. He calls them by names. He knows the two chipmunks that live in his backyard. We've got two chipmunks in our backyard. And I don't remember if that was part of the recording before or if this was part of what was lost. He knows the 3 deer that come into the neighborhood, like, not necessarily by name, but he sees them often enough. He's aware of the world around him. he also is aware of the people around him, the environment around him, all that stuff. And so it starts off with him seeing this change within the insect life in his backyard. And so he's paying attention to that and learning about it. So I'll just read through this part for you so that it'll make sense. Then I can talk and make comments as we go. Yet again, this is all just to catch you up with. I apologize. This has been all just a big experiment, and the video's lost, but I figure this is better than not doing it at all. And I'll just continue to get better as we go forward. But anyways, so the main character sees bugs turning zombie and eating each other, spreading the infection, and this is done with the reader believing that it is people turning into zombies because they are named. Okay, then we have the reveal that what he is watching is bugs. To take away the scary, that's an incomplete sentence, but it's to get rid of the scariness of the situation for the reader, but still revealing like this was a big thing for this child. We get a larger perspective as he acknowledges the rest of the world around him, so it'll show how much he knows the neighborhood and the wildlife, and this needs a funny moment. We need to take it from the dark to something light. Then need the introspection of working through the thoughts, so possibly connect with someone else, maybe a conversation with the neighborhood kids. So while I was muted showing the other stuff, I did talk through what that could look like and some ideas I had about that, which kind of led to this. Like, okay, well, how do we help him get thoughts? Well, maybe it can be a neighborhood kid. But the neighborhood kid thinks it's cool, doesn't see it as a horror, so they're not having that same meaning. They're not having the same takeaway that this main character child has. And so, it just sets that up where he's realizing that there's a disconnect somewhere, but this is still sharing the world around him and helping us more care about the character and understand who they are. So eventually he sees his dad pull into the driveway from work and he runs home, and he's going to have we're going to have a moment where we see the family dynamic. They can have dinner. Maybe it's we meet the mom and the two siblings, and we get some of the fun with some dark undertones, bringing back the issue that was introduced at the beginning of the story. So it's a callback to the beginning issue of, hey, the zombification is going on. What does this actually mean? And why is this child interpreting it the way that they are? And then before bed, dad's busy with work. Mom's trying to get the baby down, and in fear, he tries to approach his dad. And I spoke a little bit about it. Again, the recording's lost, so this is what it is, so we'll work from here. But he has a fear of judgment or a misunderstanding. Like, this is a child that, because he's very introverted, he's not so much scared of his father, but he's scared of what other people think. So, like, he wants to be very sure of himself. He wants to make sure that what his thoughts are right before he's willing to share them. So he's scared of that judgment of putting himself out there. Anyway, so there was a lot of content lost here, but that was the idea. I was just going through a paragraph at a time, kind of blocking in this outline of, here's why I think this way. Here's the things I'm drawing from the real world. Like I said, even the wildlife, in my mind, I'm imagining what this looks like based largely on where I'm at, and then how do I modify this for the story. So even some of the details that I can pull in, like having a stream with deer by it, having two chipmunks in the backyard, having, rabbits in the early morning, those types of things are things that I can draw from based on my experiences. So anyway, the rest of the video audio did work, so I will let you watch the rest of the recording from here. You have not been seeing any of this. Live chaos. Okay, so as I have been talking, it's a good thing I've been saying it out loud. I have actually also been typing as I go. So I apologize. I just noticed on the monitor that this wasn't showing up for you. All of my students are just kind of rolling their eyes right now wherever they are, or sneezing in unison or something, because as we've moved to digital, this is something that comes up, and I have them. That's where, if I had somebody live right now, it'd be nice, but that's where their job is to let me know, like, hey, you're talking about something, you're not sharing that part of your screen. Okay, I wasn't sharing this part of the screen, so you've just been looking at the picture of the cicada the whole time. Anyway, thank you for lasting with me this long. So, with that thought of his father, uh, sorry, I lost my thought as soon as I noticed that wasn't the screen that was up. I like that message of you need to make your voice known, because his dad, though his dad loves him, he can't always tell intuitively that my child needs help. He's distracted, he's busy, he's doing something else. And so sometimes part of us not receiving love, or the reason we're not able to make connections, is because we don't want to bother the other person. We don't want to become a burden. We don't want to interject. And guess what? Love and connection grows through friction, through bumping. It's better to have somebody bump you and drive you crazy than have them hide from you and never get that connection. I would rather my children be the crazy, wonderful kids they are and annoy the crap out of me and keep me from being productive and interject themselves into my space than not. I would prefer that, and I love it when they do. Sometimes it drives me nuts. So let's be honest. I go crazy sometimes because I'm just trying to get work done so that I can put it away, have my mind free, and then spend time with them. However, I would prefer them stepping in and bothering me so that I can connect with them, so I can address them. And that's, for me, more important than all these other things that seem like priorities. And they are. They're important too, but I'd rather have my children interject themselves. So he initially avoids his dad and gets a curt response and leaves still confused and unfulfilled. He has a moment of realizing that this is important and he needs to really get the help. Mainly because the thought of not getting the help and understanding it is so horrible, because if he has to go to bed with this and this misunderstanding, that's a long, miserable night ahead of tossing and turning and frustration and confusion. Like, he realizes, I need this address. I need to understand so I can get peace. Needs to understand to have peace. Reapproaches his dad more forcefully. Father, although frustrated at first, stops and has a connective and caring moment. They talk about zombies and the child's fear of zombie fungus or zombie disease spreading in the family. Wow. Father realizes that he has been sending the wrong messages to his children and making mistakes in his approach with his family. He corrects it, comes to an understanding with his child, and sends his son to bed. And so now I have my ending too. The child, and I got to get a name, so got to think of what's going to be appropriate for that too, will, in happiness and, having that wonderful kind of like the transcendent moment. Happiness and transcendence, like things are going to get better and positive. Spy's father making a phone call to relative and working to repair the relationship, to cure the zombification, and to fight against the disease. Have another opportunity for humor. So this is also getting me kind of a mood. So it starts off dark and scary. We get away from that. It's momentarily peaceful and humorous. The neighbor kids don't get it, and he starts to get concerned. He runs home. We'll have, maybe another... actually, I'm going to keep it there. It's going to get chaotic. So if I put this in, I'll just add this in kind of a mood section. So horror. This one will lead to peaceful. Maybe some more humor here. Peaceful and humor, but misunderstanding. Forgive my typing. This is kind of leading to, and by the way, I don't always write this in, but in my mind, I'm always thinking about what's happening with the emotions. How's my audience being drawn along? How is this going to help them either better receive the message or push them away from the message? Yet again, if it's too dark for too long, loses the message. If it's too light and frivolous for too long, there's no impact or meaning. So it's finding that balance. This gets into some chaos. This leads with chaos with continued descent into depression. So yet again, more of that introversion as he's going along, like more and more chaos, and he's pulling in more and more on himself as he's trying to understand. Like the chaos can be fun and playful, but there's also like what's happening around him and the connectivity and the happy side, but inside you can still be struggling. I've many times in my life been in places where everything around me is cheerful and positive and should be hilarious and wonderful and bright, but inside I was just dying and going someplace very dark. So that's what's happening with him right here, and we're following along with him as he's going through this. This leads us to the fear, and then acceptance. Like this is where he has that fear that he has to overcome. Fear, bravery, and then almost like an acceptance. So this then becomes peaceful learning. It's the moment of growth. But then that's just the call to action for the father. That doesn't mean he's actually going to do it. And so the fulfillment, this is the transcendence. That'll bring us to that end. So we start off really dark, and then it's kind of back and forth through the complexities of the emotions and the development. I apologize, I keep bumping the desk, so that's wobbling. And so this is how this story is going to kind of play out. So yet again, this is not the way I do long stories, but this is kind of some of the ways where I'll work through an outline, and sometimes I don't even have that. in a lot of cases when I'm doing, yet again, because I'm trying to show this as a process, a lot of times when I'm doing like a chapter, I'll have main character needs to have a zombie bug moment, introduce neighbor kids, introduce family, talk with dad about issue, get resolution. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how it's going to be. And so as I'm writing through it, I let it form itself where I know what the beats are. Oh, sorry. Had a timer going for pizza. We're doing sourdough pizza tonight. So that's why I need to end this, and then I'll do another recording later. But he talks to dad about the issue, gets a resolution. And so like I said, I'll again, another one of my catchphrases that I got to work on. This lays it out as I'm going to work through it, but as I'm writing a larger chapter, these sometimes will change. And what I'll do is, as I work through a chapter, it's very living. Like I'll have maybe 2 or 3 lines or a paragraph of here's what needs to happen in the next 5 or 6 chapters. Here's where it is in my head. Like I said, as a pantser for most of my writing, this is normally how it's done. And then when I work through, it's like, wow, actually, when I was writing about this meeting with the neighborhood kids, this whole other conversation kind of developed out of it while I was writing, and that took up the rest of the chapter. And guess what? He worked out his issue with the neighborhood kids, so I don't need him to talk with his dad about the issue, but in the next chapter, I still needed to introduce the family, but also I want the family to be there because of a larger thing that's going to come up later in the book. So now I need a different interaction, and I need to figure out what that is. And so those will just go to my next chapter notes, like, okay, here's my main goals for the next chapter. But then really I'm letting the characters and the situations kind of drive that. And then this is why we have multiple passes. After I go through the whole book that way, that's when I'll jump back to the beginning and go, oh, okay, this didn't go the way it should have. I really should have introduced the father and had it work out with him, because that would have tied in better later on. And so you can always change the stuff after the fact. But this is how I usually do like rough draft type writing for something longer format. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you as well. I'm going to wrap this up because I got to go do a second proofing on the sourdough for the pizzas. Oh, no. Second proofing was done a few hours ago. I need to actually start the oven, and then in a half hour I will spin the pizza dough out and get cooking. So it is that late. Anyway, once again, I'm hoping you're enjoying this process. I apologize again for not having this screen up for so long. But what we've done during this time is gone through just kind of my mental processes of one of the ways I approach stories. I've tried talking you through some of the ideas that have formed together and come together in my mind that have developed this concept for a story and how I've built it up. And so now I've got the outline, I've got the general concepts that I'm going for. I've got the main goal, like what the main core theme of this is, or the core moral message of it is. And so I've got a good start to this. As always, I'm going to finalize it and save it. So, placeholder. I love placeholder titles. So this will be zombie fungus. I don't know. I'll replace it later, but I like to have something to call it so that when I go to save it, now I can save it as zombie fungus in my working title folder. I got my organization on the desk. And then I'm going to do another video where I will sit down and actually start writing this. Hopefully you'll join me for that journey as well. Once I get through it, maybe it'll be one video, maybe it'll be 2 or 3. I don't know yet. Like I said, this is all an experiment as I'm working through this process. But at the end, I'll have this custom story, and I'll do a video where I will actually do a read aloud of the story. And if you've joined me for the journey, then you can kind of see the end product. So anyways, thank you. I keep looking at the screen, but you're up there. Or the camera is. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you or have you see me in the next video. Or you see my hand? There we go. Bye.